In this lesson, you'll learn how to use LUTs, also known as lookup tables in Photoshop, to dramatically change the look and feel of your images. We will walk through how to install custom LUTs, where they are located in Photoshop, and how to apply them to your images using adjustment layers. You'll follow along as we explore 5 different LUT styles, each creating a unique visual outcome. And you will also learn how to control brightness, contrast, and color to get the most out of this method. By the end, you'll understand how LUTs can be one of the quickest and most effective ways to stylize your photos. What are LUTs? LUTs, or lookup tables, are powerful tools used in photo and video editing to instantly change the color and tone of an image. Think of them as filters or presets that map one set of colors to another, allowing you to apply a consistent look or mood across your work with just a few clicks. LUTs are especially useful for color grading, giving your images a cinematic or stylized feel without manually adjusting every color setting. How LUTs work. A LUT takes the existing color values in an image and looks them up in a table to determine what they should be changed to, hence the name. For example, a LUT might shift blue hues towards teal or lift shadows for a faded filmic look. Overall, they are a fast and effective way to apply complex color changes. Supported LUT formats in Photoshop. Photoshop supports several LUT file formats such as .cube, which is the most widely used format, .3dl, an older format but still supported, .look, an older format from Adobe SpeedGrade, which is a discontinued Adobe software. And you can load these LUT file formats individually using a color lookup adjustment layer or in bulk via Photoshop's installation folder, which I will explain how to do in this lesson. Open and prepare the image file. First of all, drag into Photoshop the stock image file from the Assets folder, which is available for download in the video description. Once you have done that, a new composition will be created. And before we do anything, let's save our project by going to File, Save As. Make sure to select a safe location, such as your Downloads folder or your desktop. Then name the file something like LUT Project. And now at the bottom here, make sure that the format is set to Photoshop. And then press Save. Set up the workspace. Moving on, the next step we have to take is to configure the workspace. Go to Window, Workspace, Photography. Then, on the right side, where we can see our panels, hover your cursor over the edge line here, and then hold and drag using left click on your mouse to expand the view. We are doing this now so we can access our tools properly. Confirm default LUTs exist. So at this point, what we can do is add the color lookup adjustment layer by selecting the icon here. You will see that it's placed in the layer panel just above the background layer. And also, this properties window is visible. What we are going to do is select this Load 3D LUT drop-down menu, and inside of it we can see all of the default Photoshop LUTs that can be applied to your image. However, in this case, we are only taking this step to confirm that they exist within the Photoshop software. So for now, let's actually delete the Color Lookup 1 layer. With the layer selected, select the bin icon to delete it. Or you can also use the Delete or Backspace button on your keyboard. In my case, I actually deleted the layer mask of this layer, so I need to press Delete again. And now that step is complete. Backup default LUTs. So as I've just demonstrated, we saw that by default, Photoshop has its own LUT library, where we can use the color lookup adjustment layer. And in this step, we are going to create a backup copy of those files. On Mac, we can go into the Applications folder, find and select Adobe Photoshop, go into Presets, and then into 3D LUTs. In this folder, let's select all the files. Right-click and select Copy. And at this point, we can go to the desktop. On the desktop, create a new folder and name it Default Photoshop LUTs. Open it and then paste in those files. And for now, do not close these windows as we move on to the next step. Clear out old LUTs. Now, let's go back into the 3D LUTs folder where we found the original files. And make sure all of them are selected. Right-click and select Delete. On Mac or on Windows, you may be prompted to enter your system password to complete this action. And once that is done, the folder should be empty. Install custom LUTs. The next step is to open your Assets folder, which is available for download in the video description. In here, open the LUTs folder. Select all the files by pressing Command A on Mac or Control A on Windows. Now right-click and select Copy. Now navigate back to the 3D LUTs folder where the previous files were deleted and paste in the new LUT files. And you may need to use your system password again to confirm. Force quit Photoshop. At this point, we can close all the folders we have open as the LUT installation is now complete. But in order for those new LUTs to become visible, we need to close Photoshop entirely. Upon closing, press Save, and if you're using Mac, you will often have to go into your dock. Right-click the Photoshop app icon, and then select Quit in order for the software to fully close. After doing so, give it a moment to close, and make sure that a white dot is not visible below the app icon. And on Windows, you can attempt to do the same, or via the taskbar if you're using an older operating system. Relaunch Photoshop and create an image structure. So let's reopen Photoshop and open our project. Go to the Layers panel on the right and unlock the layer using the padlock. Then select the folder icon to create a new group. Rename the group to Original, and then hold and drag the image layer into this group. Then we can right-click on it, go to Color, and set it to yellow. Duplicate for LUT Application. Now, duplicate this folder by pressing Command J on Mac or Control J on Windows, and rename it to Grit. Now, right-click on it, go to Color, and set it to green. And then also open this group. Apply the Grit LUT. Now select the image layer inside of the Grit group and rename it to Image. Next, with this image layer selected, navigate to the Adjustments panel at the top and select Color Lookup. And this adjustment will be added in the Layers panel above the image layer. And a Properties window will also become visible. In this window, select the first drop-down menu labeled Load 3D LUT. Then find and select Grit. So now we can see that our image has drastically changed. The highlights, midtones, and shadow color profile has been adjusted to accommodate the Grit LUT. So now what we can do is right-click on the Color Lookup Adjustment layer and select Create Clipping Mask. We can see a small arrow to the right of this layer, which represents that it's bound to the image layer. The next step is to select the image layer. And in the Adjustments panel, select the Brightness Contrast icon. In the Layers panel, we can see that this adjustment has been added, with the clipping mask already applied. And so now, in the Properties window, let's drag the contrast slider all the way to the left so it's set to -50. Then select the brightness contrast layer and press Command J on Mac or Ctrl J on Windows to duplicate this layer. We can see that the clipping mask is not active on this layer. So we can right-click on it and select Create Clipping Mask. Now select this layer and in the Properties window, set the brightness to 15. And then close the Properties window using the close arrow icon here. At this point, the image is looking amazing, since we adjusted the brightness and contrast. But as a bonus, I'd love to show you how to add grain to this image to make it look more cinematic. Start by right-clicking on the image layer and then select Convert to Smart Object. And then go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. Now, in this window, set the noise level to 15%, making sure the distribution is set to uniform. And then select OK. Great, so our image is looking amazing so far. It even slightly looks like it was shot with a real 35mm film camera. Moving on, let's expand the layer panel by hovering your mouse cursor on this edge line and dragging it up. And now we can close the grid group. Apply the matrix LUT. With this grid group in place, we can duplicate it by pressing Command J on Mac or Ctrl J on Windows. Let's rename this new group to Matrix. Open the group, double-click on the Color Lookup Adjustment layer thumbnail until you see the Properties window open. Then select the drop-down menu and find Matrix V1. This action applies to the new LUT, and we can see how the color hues shifted to green. Now close this Properties window, then double-click on the first brightness contrast layer. And in this window, set the brightness to 25. Then close the Properties window. And that's as much as I want to change for this look, so I will minimize this group. Apply the Godfather LUT. Following that, let's duplicate the Matrix group and rename the new group to Godfather. Open this new group and then double-click on the Color Lookup Adjustment layer. And in the drop-down menu, find the Godfather LUT. We can see that the image colors have shifted, and now we can close the Properties window. From here, we can navigate to the first brightness contrast adjustment layer and double-click on it until we see the Properties window. In here, set the brightness to 70. Then close the Properties window. And we can minimize this group, and that will be all the steps we take for this particular look. Apply the Revenant LUT. Following that, let's duplicate the Godfather group and rename the new group to Revenant. Open this new group and then double-click on the Color Lookup Adjustment layer. And in the drop-down menu, find the Revenant LUT. We can see once again that the colors have shifted, this time to blue hues. We can now close the Properties window and navigate to the first brightness contrast adjustment layer. Double-click on it until we see the Properties window. And in here, set the brightness to 15. So far, the image looks incredible, but I would prefer if the orange hue on the tent was slightly less vibrant. And to tackle this, select the Color Lookup Adjustment layer. Then, in the Adjustments panel on the top, select the Hue Saturation icon. We can see that this new layer is not bound with a clipping mask, so we can fix that. Right-click on this layer and select Create Clipping Mask. Now in the Properties window, select the red circular icon. And if you're using an older version of Photoshop, you may need to use the drop-down menu and select the red hues. And what we're going to do is reduce the saturation to -25. This action gives us control over the light emitting from the tent, as we only selected the red hues, where this orange color is closest to in the overall color spectrum. And so with that color reduced, we can close the properties window. And if I toggle the visibility of this adjustment layer, we can see how much of a difference it makes. Now we can minimize this group, and that's it for this particular look. Apply the Vinteo LUT. Following that, let's duplicate the Revenant group and rename the new group to Vinteo. Open this new group, select the hue saturation layer, then delete it by pressing the delete button on your keyboard, or alternatively, the backspace button on your keyboard. If those options do not work, you can press the trash icon here. Next, click on the color lookup thumbnail until the properties window is visible. Then in the drop-down menu, find and select the Vinteo LUT, and close the properties window. So the result of this LUT being applied causes the shadow values of the original image to be very white. In order to control this, we first need to select the color lookup adjustment layer. Then navigate to the levels icon and select it. Once this layer is added, we can right-click on it and select Create Clipping Mask, so it's bound to the image layer. Then in the Properties window, we can hold and drag this slider to change the intensity of the dark values. A subtle adjustment of this will be more than enough, so let's type in 15. And now we can close the Properties window. Then minimize this layer group. Final comparison. So that's all the LUTs applied for this lesson. Now if I toggle the visibility of each group, we can see how distinct and different the image looks like with each LUT and adjustment layers applied. And of course, we can always go back to a group and toggle the effects applied, such as the noise filter. Image Export Method 1. Let's talk about saving your edited images. The first quick way to save all the edited images at once is by using the Quick Export function. Select the topmost layer in the sequence, which is labeled Vinteo, then hold Shift on your keyboard and select the grid group. Now you can let go of Shift, right-click on the selection and choose Quick Export as PNG. And once you do this, you can select a secure save location. We can create a new folder and name it Exported Photos, and then select Open. Now, don't do anything until your cursor is no longer displaying as a load icon, as this suggests that Photoshop is processing your images. Once it's done loading, go to your chosen save location, and you will see that all the images are saved individually with their effects applied. This is a quick way to save your images, but the nature of this method and the PNG format means that your image file sizes will be very large. Image Export Method 2. The second method of exporting your edited images gives you control over the file sizes. To start, enable the visibility of the image you would like to export. Then go to File, Export, Save for Web Legacy. Inside of this window, you can zoom out to preview your image. Then in the drop-down menu at the top, select JPEG. As we move the slider to change the value of the quality, the export file size will also be changed. And we can preview the file size in the bottom left corner of this window. We can also change the image size, and this has further impact on the export file size. Typically, the bigger the resolution, the bigger the file size will be. If I change the resolution to 1080p and maximize the quality, the file size is only 2 megabytes. However, if I change the percentage to 100%, which brings back the original resolution, we can see that the file size is now 21 megabytes. If you want to retain your image resolution but reduce the file size, don't change these values, but instead focus on finding a sweet spot by using the quality slider. In this instance, reducing the quality by 50% causes the file size to drop from 21 megabytes to only 2 megabytes. And once you're ready to export, simply select Save, then choose a save location. Now let's find and open this file, and as you can see, the image looks brilliant, even with a 50% reduction in quality. Recap: why LUTs matter. You didn't just apply a filter, you learned how to color grade an image like a pro using LUTs. In this lesson, you learned how to install and manage custom LUTs, use clipping masks and adjustment layers to fine-tune your look, and create a reusable structure for professional editing. This kind of layered approach is the foundation of professional color work, whether you're prepping for social media, digital art, or cinematic storytelling. So now, the question is, are you ready for the next lesson?